Wow, Peninnah, this is so amazing. And I want to take this opportunity to share with you, our viewers and listeners, about not only the power of stories, but maybe if you can share with us a little bit about what storytelling is and how can they implemented not as professionals necessarily, but at home or in the classroom. I meant not as professional storytellers, but as people who tell stories. And how can we empower children to do the same?
Wonderful. Okay. My definition of storytelling is one word: dialogue or conversation. You take your pick of which word, dialogue or conversation. Both, of course, really are involving a given and um, taking. It's the listener listening actively. As a matter of fact, it's not a solo, it's not a monologue. It is a interaction event, and it's wait, yes, yes. So I want to tell you a story, an anecdote first, and then a story. And this happened with Andres Segovia, the famous classical guitarist. And he was an elder when he was being interviewed by a young reporter. And the reporter said, "Mr. Segovia, you have played hundreds of thousands of concerts in your life, and many more come to come. And maybe there's an encore at every concert. So don't you ever get bored?" And Segovia looked at that young reporter and said, "I am never bored because I am present at every note. I am present at every note." Real storytelling is not just to show off or to learn the like in a play, to read it and or say it by rote, maybe with some emotion as a character, but still the storyteller takes it from the heart and really wants to bring to alive the storyteller and the story and the listener, the three ingredients, if you will, or components. And therefore, when you are really telling a story that you love and that you need, and you bring it alive, why, whether it's a child or an elder, they will listen and give you back their emotions and their feelings about what you were telling in the story. As a matter of fact, there is a 12 word poem that says it all. And then I'm going to tell you that story that I mentioned. This poem has become one of my most favorite, is by Muriel Rukeyser. And so it'll be easy for you to learn and remember and repeat. Listen, listen. The world is made up of stories, not of atoms. Isn't that magnificent? Listen, listen. The world is made up of stories, not of atoms. And one of the questions a lot of people ask me is, how do you choose the story? After all, you read hundreds and dozens of hundreds, and you like this one and that one and that, and some, and you're not memorizing. When I tell a story, it's an image, movie going through my head. And I'm there. I am present at every syllable, at every pause. That silence is part of sound. And so phrasing and transitions, all of those things, because the voice is a musical instrument, as I've said, and it is not just, a sound. So when people ask me, how do you choose the stories? I answer with a question. That's what we do. And so that is how the Maggid of Dubno worked, where he traveled around communities and towns and teaching what that community needs. And so one day, the Dubno Maggid was walking along with a student. And the student looked and said, "Tell me, my Rebbe, my teacher, how is it you always have the perfect story that fits the discussion?" And the Maggid of Dubno said, "I'll tell you a story. Once a nobleman sent his young son to the military academy to learn how to shoot. And after 5 years, this lieutenant now had medals on his chest, a diploma in his pocket, and he got onto his horse and was going back home. But as he was riding, he came to a small little village, and there on the barn, he saw 100 circles on the side of the barn, written in chalk. And in the center of each circle was a bullet hole. Well, this lieutenant stopped his horse and said, "Who is this? A man who could shoot 100 perfect bullseyes? I can't even do that. I must meet him." And just then a child walked across and said, "Oh no, that's Narla." And Narla is a little crazy, but I must meet him. I could not possibly make 100 bullseyes. And he said, "No, you don't understand. Narla doesn't draw the circle first and then shoot. First, he shoots, and then he draws the circle." And that's how it is with me, said the Maggid of Dubno. I don't just happen to have the perfect story to fit the discussion. First, I read a lot of stories. I listen to a lot of stories, and I keep those stories in my head. And then when I find a story that I love and need to tell, then I introduce the subject for which I have the perfect story. And that's, isn't it, Evelyn, how we work? We love a story, and we want to, the urge to tell is one of the human ways. And so when there is something, a crisis or some happiness or some simcha, or you find a story that you love, you are then bringing it in because you have to tell a story. And you are going to tailor it in a custom way so that you can tell that story. And one story will trigger another, and somebody will say, "Well, wait a minute." And on it goes, and it's really a marathon of stories. We need a tsunami of stories in the world to bring more peace, to create bonds between people. And as Agnon has in one of his novels, from foe to friend, you tell a story to someone and they become your friend because they understand you. There's more tolerance, there's more interest, there's more, "Oh, let me tell you a story." And then it becomes just a beautiful, beautiful relationship. Yes. So
Amen.
that's the Dubner Maggid story,
Wow.
the bullseye.
Wow. I I want to highlight three things. First of all, I love the story. More than that, I love your telling of this story and how you tell it. And you can, if you're seeing the video, Peninnah is really seeing the story. You can see it in her eyes. She's looking and she's guiding us through this live movie in her head. And it's like a, a museum. and it's everything is alive around her.
Mhm.
And the third thing that I even if I may say so, love more is that, and I ask you, friend, watching, listening to this, when was it the last time you had such a beautiful lady tell a story to you? Beautiful outside, in the inside, in the soul. When was the last time you were the listener of an amazing story? And what a privilege, Peninnah, really, to have that, because as adults, right, people expect us to tell stories, but sometimes we don't make the time, or we don't have the honor of having someone who can really tuck us in and share with us a story from the heart. So thank you, Toda, from
Thank you.
my heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Evelyn. And there's so much to say about stories and the power of stories and why we must have stories now, as I say, especially now when we are so, I don't know, bringing too much of the technical. I'm a semi-Luddite. I do have a computer. I just got a cell phone that I hardly use. And they all laughed at me before. And, but the human, we've got to build up that relationship. And certainly, I never dreamed I would have a biography written about me. It's a whole journey and story and 5 years of persuasion. But now that I have this Peninnah's World, a Jewish life in stories, it's a blessing, and it's wonderful because I'm really reliving so many events and adventures and the people and so much. And then I realized, after having it in my hands and thinking about it and how I wanted, and Karen Neal was a wonderful, sensitive and understanding and talented and skilled writer of this biography, and taking what I told her in many, many, many interviews for several years. I wanted to honor my mother and father and their wisdom. And every story is in every story there is wisdom embedded, and that's what Dov Noy, the great folklorist, had told me, and I may have mentioned it this a little while ago. But this is my ethical will, which is a magnificent type of will to transmit the values, how to live in a Jewish life, etc., etc. I mean, so much. This is my ethical will. It's not just, about my life. And then I wrote, yeah, right. But I'm very blessed, as I said. Yeah.
Let me share with everybody listening or watching this. I read your book, that book. Well, I say it's your book because I have actually your books right here, and that one is, these are stories that Peninnah compiled, and I have more, but that book, it's magical, and I couldn't put it down. It's not only your story, which is impressive, and I felt privileged of getting to know all these aspects of you that I had no idea. Even though I already knew how magnificent you are, I didn't know of so many things about your journey, which happens, as we meet people, we see parts, where we listen to parts of their stories, and it's a whole being. But the author did such an amazing job of weaving stories and presenting your life as a story that, like you said, it's filled with wisdom, and it's such a gift. I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely recommend everyone to go get your copy and to be immersed in Peninnah's world, because really it's a work of art, your life and how you present it through this book. So I am so grateful that you took the time, that the author, that Karen took the time, and her craft, because really it's so well crafted to share your story in this way. So
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you. Somebody once asked me fairly recently, is all your life in this book? And I remembered Marshall Dodge up in the state of Maine used to tell this joke. There was a farmer in Maine sitting on his porch in his rocking chair, and when a city slicker walked by, stopped and said, "Hey, you farmer, have you lived here all your life?" And the farmer looked at this city slicker and said, "Not yet." So it's not yet my entire life.
Thank God, and maybe stream. Absolutely. Yes. So speaking about
See
it's
the urge to
right.
tell.
It is right. It is
Yeah.
right. But it's just a beautiful piece.
Yes.
And really it I learned so much and I was so moved by it. So I thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
wanted us to move a little
Mhm.
bit with stories, if that's okay with you. We are coming from Yom HaShoah,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
stories with that aspect are so important because, first of all, so many people could not even fathom the idea of sharing the tragedies and the horror that they went through,
Yeah.
and coming all the way to nowadays where our survivors are, getting older and passing away, and we are our generation and a few younger generations we are the last ones to actually be in touch with them and to really
Mhm.
hear this firsthand. And there's a beautiful program, I don't know if you've heard about it, called Zikaron Basalon. I think it was
No.
um,
Mm.
a lady in Israel created it, and it's all over the world, memories in the living room. And it's about not having conferences, but an intimate talk with a survivor of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, sharing their
Mhm.
story to a group of people. And it's all through storytelling. It's not about
Mhm.
reading their book or their memoir, it's about being there. And the power in transmitting that, the healing, the wisdom. I was fortunate to go to one of these events, and I remember that the lady, she had such a joy for living. Actually, that's what she believes saved her. And to honor, right, the
Yeah.
people, and how sometimes how not telling something works, and we can even maybe preach that to kids. Sometimes they go through something and they do not know when how to even start telling the stories, and how
Mhm.
as adults we can open that door and build that bridge so that when kids do need to share with us something, they are confident, they're not ashamed, they're not embarrassed. And how through stories, they have a healing power, like you said. So maybe not only for survivors, but even talking about kids with everyday trauma, teenagers, how can stories, and the way, even not only how they share the stories, but the stories that we tell ourselves of what happens in our lives. And I go back to a generous story about when you encounter a challenge, a big challenge, a hurting challenge, and the story you told yourself was not, I'm not good enough, I'm going to bed, I have to pursue the next thing. The story you told yourself is, maybe this is a door, maybe this is an Elijah, maybe and I don't know if you were conscious of that, but now you tell yourself that story. And so
Mhm.
stories shape how we feel. And I'm going to bridge that because we might want to stop there in this concept, but going into Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaTzmaut, where we will be remembering everyone who gave their lives, whether in the IDF or we also remember those perished by the horrors of terrorism, and then we remember the rebirth of Israel, because Israel is not 75 years old, the modern state is, but thousands of years old, and the stories that we tell around that, and how that can also help our children feel the pride and the joy of having a state, especially for a generation like you. I'm coming back to what you said about Moshe telling the generation that wasn't there for it. This new generation, I wasn't there for the 1,000 years of galut, of diaspora. I wasn't there for the Akamat Medina, for the rebirth of the state of Israel, or the birth of the modern state. I wasn't there through the struggles, and so everything is, how can we tell the stories in a way that we don't take this for granted. Like
Mm,
Moshe was retelling the stories, I imagine, so that they didn't take the miracles of
mm.
God taking us out of Egypt for granted and receiving the Torah for granted. So I mean, I put in a lot in this bullseye, but I'm sure I'm talking to the right person here. So I would love to hear from you on what your thoughts are on this.
Well, it's very, very dear and close to my heart. My mother did come from White Russia in 1926, and she kissed the earth of America. My father was a Zionist, a Zionist, an ardent scientist. If anybody said anything against Israel, Eretz Israel, oh yeah, watch out. In fact, in 1930, he bought a lot of in Israel, in Yavne, and he yearned to live in Israel. He hoped that he would be able to go there and live. It didn't happen, but he went about every 10 years, he would go and make a long visit. Well, time went by and I was finished with graduate school at New York and Columbia University, and I wanted to go with a friend to Europe for a 9-week visit, a tour on our own, and we would go to France and England and Italy, everywhere there. And I said to my father and mother, I need some money. I need permission to make sure that I'm all ready to go. And my father said, better go to Israel. I said, Pa, you love Israel, but I'll get there someday. But I want to go to Europe. I mean, I have studied the art of the great artists in museums in England and France and Italy, and they have all the things that I've learned in classes in my high school and college and graduate school. I want to see what I've learned about all these countries. And he said, Peninnah, better to go to Israel. After all, Israel is your mama, is like your mama. There are mamas more beautiful. They are more fashionably with dress, and maybe they're more educated than your mama, and maybe they're this than, and he would give me other comparisons. He said, but Israel is like your mama. And I said, okay. I sat and listened, and I went to Europe. Well, it was years later with my late husband, Irving Schram. We went to Israel for the first time, and it was on the ship coming in. We were on a Herzl, one of those ships across the Mediterranean or whatever to get us to Israel. And it was the first time that I had sung the Hatikva right on the banks of Eretz Israel with tears and all. And I thought, oh, there's something different here. And we had a wonderful visit. We visited, well, families and friends, and much to say about that. And then years went by, and we had our children, my daughter Rebecca, my son Mordechai, and well, Rebecca was in her 3rd year at college, and she went to Israel for that 1 year, and she never returned because she found the man of her heart, a beautiful, wonderful husband now of 35, 36 years. And I have 3 Sabra grandchildren. who are now in their 20s, and they've gone through the IDF and all of that. And I said, Rebecca, you went to Israel and you're living there, and I don't get to see you as much as I want to. And she says, well, I'm fulfilling your father's dreams to live in Eretz Israel. And I said, well, what about my mother? She says, you fulfill her dream of being in America. And so this is how. And so I always remember, better go to Israel. And because Rebecca now and her family is there, I try to go at least once a year, maybe twice a year. And I understand how much he yearned for Israel, every holy step, the air, the people. And we all better go to Israel. And yeah.
It's such
in
a
our hearts, in our neshamas. Yeah.
and it's such a privilege again that we are in this generation with the state of Israel. Not perfect, but
No.
definitely, not only our own, but definitely a good place to be, a place full of history, a place of people trying to do good, a place where there's so much to learn, so much to grow, and a place that deserves a chance.
Yeah.
Definitely. So maybe we can think about that in the stories that we tell our children, especially when media can be so hurtful and harsh, when Zionism seems like a bad word. And really coming back to your story, Peninnah, not letting other people dictate who we are, who we know we are, who we are supposed to be, and to hush us, and to censor us, because everyone has the right to live their story, to share their story, and hopefully to listen. And this is how we can
That's
understand.
key. That's a key word, to listen. When King Solomon was told by Hashem to wish for anything he would want, Hashem would grant it. And we think, when I ask people, they say, well, he wished for wisdom. Yes, but what he said was, he didn't say Chachma, but rather Lev Shameya, a listening heart, an understanding heart, a compassionate heart. That is, when you have that kind of Lev Shammaya, then you have wisdom. And with all of the stories where there's wisdom embedded in a message that resonates with us as Jews, in every single story, as I say, even, the film stories or the trickster stories, but the folk tales, etc., then we really have a way to learn and have wisdom. So I think that what King Solomon wished for is also the key, to listen and have a listening heart, a compassionate heart.
Amen. May it be so. And Peninnah, I cannot I cannot thank you enough for this masterclass, not only storytelling. And if you listen to it with care, you will see how Peninnah talks in stories. She lives in stories. And that's what the book portrays so beautifully. Before we go, I wanted to share two things. First of all, that Peninnah so kindly made available for all of us three documents. One is called Your Personal Storytelling History. The second one, Selected Biography of Jewish Story and Folktale Collections. And the third one, Guidelines for Storytellers. These are invaluable resources. And if you're interested, just comment below this video. Or if you're listening to the Raising Jewish Kids podcast, you can reach me at Torahtron, that's Torah with an H, Torahtron, @gmail.com, or send me a message through my website, shalomeve.com, and I will make this gift from Peninnah available. Peninnah, before we go, two short things. In my book, I needed to introduce a story, and through a QR code, the kids can see one of the stories that inspired the book. Because I was saying, how can kids pray with their heart?
Mm-hmm.
And I retell with my puppet Leo, that you know very well,
Oh,
the
yes.
story.
Love it. I love it. Oh,
The story of the boy who prayed the alphabet, the story of the boy who was trying to pray to God by using the letters of the alphabet. So I love all the versions that I've heard from you and from our other master storytellers, my other master storytellers, and I sort of create this version with Leo, and I think it's a way to relate kids to the magic of storytelling and to
mhm.
empower them to use their words for telling stories, and also, why not, for praying, because it's not that far away telling a story from praying, is it?
Right. And then what we didn't even have time, of course, to mention this is that we each have the longest and shortest story that we could ever tell, and that is our names.
Mm.
Our name is a story. Who we were named after, who was that person, what does it mean, and so much to explore with names. And one of the major Jewish traditions we have is to have a name pasuk. And so I'm just going to show you, this is the Peninnah name pasuk, calligraphied by Sonia Gordon Walensky. And Peninnah means pearl. And I mean, there's so much about the story of the name and how I feel about it and how I grew into that story, because then we belong with that name, and we are inspired with the name. It's magnetic and magnificent and magical. And thank you, Evelyn, because the enthusiasm, the joy that just comes through, as somebody once said, what's inside you, it comes out of you. There is light, there is joy, there is smiles and joyous laughter. I love the word joyous, and the carefulness and the caring and the thoughtfulness and the meaningfulness. And what you are doing is that you are really bringing stories in so many different media and many different styles. And so if some child likes the puppet, or the other one likes the song, or this one loves just to look at you, which is true, and you are reaching their hearts and their neshamas. And so when we say how we pray, my people used to say, my father would daven, and with sein ganze neshama. And that's how we tell stories. So thank you so very much. And if anybody has questions or asks more about the handouts or the name pasuk, or my biography, or any of the books, or anybody else's, because you have a wonderful bibliography that I compiled of many collections of stories and their folk tales, give them my email address, and
Amazing.
I will be very happy with you to answer any questions.
Oh, this is such a gift and such an invitation. So I encourage everybody who would like to get in touch with Peninnah and to check out her books. Are available at bookstores, Amazon, everywhere online. Amazon was just an example. You go to your favorite place to get them. I really encourage you to read Peninnah's World, but also all of her stories. We have such a gift. I want to thank you from my heart, and thank you for the kind words. I'm being blessed with having such great mentors as you, and all of the faculty at Rice, Cherie, Ara Schwartz, Batia Poros, all these amazing people that are your friends and now mine too. And I hope to have in the podcast. I also want to say that Peninnah is a guest master storyteller at Hebrew School Podcast. And with my little one, we are listening to your stories there, and it's such a joy. Kids need stories and they love storytelling. And if you hear Peninnah's stories for children, you will learn that you don't need all the extravaganza, you don't need the special effects, you don't need, the interactive media technology. You need the voice, the musicality, the neshama, the soul, and just, the pearls of wisdom that Peninnah, which is the Hebrew word for pearls.
Thank you so much from my heart. And I'm very blessed to be a friend with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Shalom. Yom HaAtzmaut Sameach. Let's be joyous. Let's celebrate. Let's listen to each other's stories so that we can unite, other than highlight our differences. We all manifestations of the great creator and the greatest storyteller in the world, God, of course.
And whenever Dov Noy, the greatest of the folklorists, who did so much for founding the Israel Folktale Archives, and so much more to say about this. But when he would say goodbye on the phone or in person, he would always say, Shalom, shalom. So shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you, thank you.